Hello, my name is Mahad Beg. I am a final year medical student and the president of the DRS. Along with me, we have Rafael Usman, who's the co-president of the DRS, and Rafael Abbasi, who's the vice president of the DRS. And today we're going to go cover a topic called the IRB Form Components, which is often pretty intimidating for both students and professors. So hopefully we can race through this and you guys will have more confidence when dealing with this institution. The IRB stands for Institutional Review Board, and the reason why it's the Institutional Review Board is that it's respective to every institution. So in our case, the Dow institution, and Review Board because they review your projects for ethics, and you need their ethics approval unless you qualify for an IRB exemption, in which case your project will most likely fulfill one of these criteria. These I've literally just copied and pasted from their IRB exemption form, and it's pretty straightforward. Basically, if your project does not involve some kind of intervention, then usually you can qualify for IRB exemption. But please do read these more carefully, and of course consult with your principal investigator, who is the doctor supervising your project. If it does not qualify for an exemption, then it needs to undergo the full IRB process. Now, the reason why we kind of not prefer necessarily, but why an IRB exemption is advantageous to us sometimes is because if your project qualifies for IRB exemption, then you don't have to wait for the full IRB process to take place, which can take often multiple months. So IRB exemption is a lot shorter and you can get started with your project much sooner, whereas this takes a few months. Now for IRB approval and even the exemption, you will usually need to submit at least these documents, which is the cover letter, the synopsis, and the IRB form filled. Now, if you have HEC funding or if you're using some kind of funding, then you will also have to turn in the budget, and the document for that is available on the IRB website as well, in addition to the IRB form filled, or not filled, but just the normal IRB form. And then you will also have to submit any other documents that are necessary. Like if you have a questionnaire, then you're going to have to submit your questionnaire with the informed consent. And both of these things have to be in English and Urdu to make sure that you're accommodating both populations. And you will also have to explain how you're going to accommodate people with disabilities, for example, as well, but we'll come to that later. Same thing with brochures, handouts, consent letters from other institutions. So this part is important. If you want to do your project in the vicinity of a different kind of campus or department, then you're going to need the consent from that department as well, which is what that is. You must get all the documents signed where necessary, and then you're going to have to create 2 sets of those documents in the hard copy form. So basically, after you get everything signed, then have everything photocopied so that there's another set. And then also, you're going to have everything scanned to make sure that you have the soft copy as well. So you're going to deliver the soft copy to this email address, which is the IRB address, and you're going to send both sets of hard copies to the IRB office of Dow Medical College. The IRB office of Dow University of Health Sciences is at DMC. So if you're a Dow International Medical College student, DIMC, then you're going to have to make sure that both sets of those hard copies get delivered somehow to the IRB office. I sometimes have even ran them myself, but I think there's also some kind of delivery service that goes, like a courier service that goes from DIMC to DMC pretty regularly as well. So I guess you could submit it to them, but I don't know if students have access to that. So this can be inconvenient, but you must make sure that both sets reach the IRB office, which is located at DMC. You could get outright rejected. So in that case, you need to make sure that you seriously revise your project, and they will often give you remarks to explain why that happened. This doesn't happen very often, but if it does, then obviously you need to seriously reconsider whatever you submitted. And if you're considered, they will invite the principal investigator to DMC, and they will ask them questions about your research paper. You can go with the principal investigator if you want, but usually it's just very inconvenient. So I would just let the principal investigator do it. And that is why you should also make sure the principal investigator knows what you've written in the IRB form documents, because of course they will be asked about it. And so then after that happens, either, again, they could reject you or they can give you provisional acceptance, in which case they will allow a round of revisions and they will give remarks. And the remarks document that they give you, you should make into a sort of columnar format so that you can write across from each remark what you have done to satisfy that remark. And In addition to that, make sure whatever changes you make to your original documents, like your synopsis or your IRB form, that you highlight that so that it's very easy for them to find. And then you will resubmit all those documents and wait for your full approval before you start your investigation. And so now let's go over the actual documents. And what I've done is I've taken all the most common documents that you guys need to submit, and I've made a folder on Google Drive for which I'll provide you guys all the link. And you'll be able to view each and every one of these documents so that you can make a copy of it or a shortcut into your own drives, or you can just take a Word document download from it by right-clicking and then pressing download, which is here. And then that way you can edit them as you please. And they're kind of already made into templates. And you'll see what I mean once I click on this. So let's look at the cover letter that we need to submit. Again, very self-explanatory. You'll write cover letter up here. It's already written here for you, with the title, the address of the institution you're starting from, principal investigator's name, credentials, and their signature needs to go here. I often just take a e-signature, which you can either, if you have a tablet, take it like that, or just simply take a picture of their signature on a white background and scan it. And then I have my name here, and you need to include your own credentials as well as all of your peers who are working on the project. This is a template of the letter that you need to submit. This is the actual letter part of the cover letter. Again, very self-explanatory. I've written a lot of it for you, but you need to fill it in and make sure that you write it according to your project. All right, so that's the cover letter. Let's now look at the synopsis. Another very common thing that you have to submit across even exemption. So title here. Now the credentials and name of the professor. Maybe he's not an associate professor, maybe he's whatever professor, just make sure that you edit it accordingly, right? Maybe you're not a DIMC student, maybe you're a DMC student, so make sure you edit that accordingly. And your name and your credentials, of course. And so here, they ask you a lot more detail, not that they ask you, but you have to present this, more detail about your project. So the introduction is going to be written with the background knowledge that you want your readers to have. And there's kind of an art to writing an introduction. You can look at many other examples available online in other articles about how people have written their introductions to their journals. Basically, the ideal introduction here would be kind of almost very close to the same thing that you would write for your actual manuscript once you go for publishing. So you might as well just get it out of the way now. And you're going to have to use citations as well. And so then the objectives are going to be in this format. To do what? To observe the trends in blah, 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 right? So that's an example. Rationale is why you're doing this investigation. How will it help society? And what will it discover? Methodology section includes these things, these headings, right? So study design, is it a retrospective, observational, is it cross-sectional? Whatever it is, write it there. The place of the study, you need to write the full address here. The duration, of course, again, most of these are pretty self-explanatory, and I've written all of it, not all of it, but a lot of it here. And you can change it as you see fit according to your investigation. And we have analysis here. What things did you use? The most commonly people use SPSS for statistics, and Google Sheets is what I use for tabulating data in an Excel type file. And percentages and frequencies just means counting up how many people said this, how many people said that. Very easy. Inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria we've gone over in previous lectures as well. Operational definitions can be a little bit tricky, but basically any technical term you use, something that maybe a layperson wouldn't understand, you should write it here and then write the definition of it so that people can follow along with your research. And your data collection and tabulation, how it was received, how it will be stored, how it will be returned, how it will be dealt with, everything, every detail that you can write, you should write it here. And your references, most professors prefer Vancouver format. And we're going to have another whole lecture about just how to deal with references, what are references and everything like that in subsequent lectures as well. So here's a brief overview of the blank synopsis, or the synopsis document. Now let's go over the exemption form, IRB exemption. If you satisfy some of the criteria for IRB exemption, then you're going to fill out this form. And here they've given you some of the requirements that they need you to include here. A lot of these will not apply to us, like drug brochures. We're often not going to be dealing with this, but if you are, then of course it applies to you. And of course, get your signatures. Okay, so this can be tricky for some people, supervisor and chairman. For our purposes, principal investigator is the only one we have to deal with. Here you would just write NA, or just straight up delete it. That's all we need because we have a doctor who's supervising our project. If this is needed, then your principal investigator will know and they will tell you. Again, how to complete the form, they've enlisted this pretty clearly for you all. So please do read over this so that you have an idea of what's going on. And of course, they've given you all the supporting documents as well here. Again, self-explanatory, fill this out as necessary. Co-investigators include you and your fellow students or your fellow colleagues, I guess. And here, if there's more than 3, write their names and institutions only. Just follow directions, right? This is what I copied and pasted over there, if you remember. And for a lot of this, you can write NA, right? So 1-page summary of the research methodology. Basically, if you remember all of the headings that were in the synopsis document, you're going to write them here, but in much more detail. It will take up a whole page, right? What are the aims and objectives? Again, a lot of the same things that are being asked in the synopsis document, but over here, you're going to just add it in a little bit more detail. And how the material will be organized and collected. Again, very self-explanatory. This can be confusing for some people, sampling technique and sample size used. We've gone over some sampling techniques in previous lectures, and how the sample size was calculated. Is often through something called a sample size calculator. So one that I often use is Rousoft. So Rousoft sample size calculator. It's pretty simple. You just go here and you just type in with the following information. This can be confusing for a lot of people, but you can ask your principal investigator about this. For most people, if it's a very novel research, then you don't have to edit these. But ideally, you will be able to modify at least one of these factors, and it'll tell you what your recommended sample size is here. All right, so with that out of the way, let's go back. And if you're using medical records, inclusion, exclusion, again, we've gone through a lot of this terminology already. This will be like NA for most of us, right? We're not going to normally be dealing with biohazardous material, right? Estimated costs will also be NA for a lot of people, or just write 0.00, right? Primary outcomes, again, like what do you hope to achieve? And if there's any external collaborators, again, for a lot of people, it'll be NA. And the ownership of the data will be owned by the university, Dow University, right? So that's our exemption form. Now let's go over to the full IRB form, which I have put right here, blank IRB form. So here's the blank IRB form. You can see that it starts out pretty much identically to the exemption form, but it's a lot longer. As you can see by here, it's 15 pages. So a lot longer, not handwritten, it must be typed. So that's why I created this file so that you all have this digital version within easy access. And they very nicely wrote all of this in great detail and have even written like the address here. Again, self-explanatory, fill this in as it is asked. One of these categories for your research project. All right, so clinical trials, medical devices, most of us will not be dealing with that stuff. Most of us will be dealing with things like, for example, qualitative methods only, or interviews, right? Or if it's any other category, then you can list it here as well. Again, NA for most of us. Are you going to include children or pregnant women? For most of us, it'll be no. But if it's something that maybe could include pregnant women, then obviously you need to explain why you wouldn't include them, if so. Summary of the project, again, very self-explanatory. Justification, we've already gone over. Inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria, already gone over. Detailed methodology, again, same thing from the exemption. Interventions, procedures. I've kind of written everything in sort of a template to make it easy for you guys, or as easy as possible, right? So at your leisure, please do open the link and sort of go through this so that you can develop a familiarity with it. And as always, if you have any questions regarding this form, please don't hesitate to ask. I've removed any kind of identifying features from this, so still make sure that you read all the content very closely so that it matches with your actual project, right? So I'm trying to think if there's anything else that needs to be discussed in more detail, which I don't think so. External funding, I already talked about. Most of us won't have to deal with that. And you can pretty much fly through this form. And where will the research take place? For example, if it's an online research, then you'll use an online questionnaire. That's kind of what I filled this out according to. Most of you will be doing online questionnaires, so this is how you would fill it. And that's how you would write like a snowball sampling collection, which we've gone over what that means in previous lectures. This is a declaration that needs to be signed by the principal investigator, who is the supervisor to your project. They have a space here. Okay, so here's a Gantt chart. This doesn't come with, this text doesn't come with the form, but I've written this because this will be common to most, if not all of your cross-sectional study projects. It's very sort of not vague, but generic. So hopefully it should be helpful to all of you. And then what you would do here is you would just color this in to make it a little bit pretty according to however long you're going to need for it, like that, right? And so that is the IRB form. Now, the other thing that I want to kind of look at with you guys is the blank data collection letter. So if you want to collect data from a specific department, like, for example, if you want to ask dental students or biotechnology students, like to fill out your survey, or if you want to go to Grattan University, for example, then you need to sort of make a form that looks kind of like this. And I've made this a template for you guys as well for you to fill in. And of course, your principal investigator's name has to be here, and it needs to get signed by whoever's in charge of that institution, and the principal investigator, of course. And here is the PI checklist, which is also available on the IRB form website. And you should also submit this with your other forms and tick appropriately here. Just copy and paste this into soft form so that you can edit this and make ticks here. And as you can see, the cover letter, these are the components of the cover letter. These are the components of the IRB form, components of Synopsis, etc. A lot of these things we don't have to deal with, like the GAP form and the scientific committee approval letter. If you're using pre-validated questionnaires, you don't have to do this. This is mostly applicable to thesis students, thesis level graduate students. And budget of the study, again, if you're using HEC funding, for example, you'll include that. The GNAT chart, I think they just mean the Gantt chart. And make sure that all the columns are filled, obviously. And we've already gone over these things as well. Case report forms. If you're doing a case report, then you should submit like what data that you have and the sample consent forms as well.